The sky above New York City was unusually clear on December 24th, 2025. People bustled through the streets, their arms loaded with shopping bags and holiday decorations. Christmas lights twinkled in windows, and carollers sang cheerful tunes on street corners. It felt like any other ordinary day until the world changed forever. At exactly 3:17 p.m., a shadow passed over the city. At first, people thought it was just a cloud blocking the sun. But when they looked up, their hearts froze. A massive object loomed in the sky, its surface shimmering like polished metal. Then came another and another, until dozens of enormous ships filled the horizon. They were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, smooth, angular, and impossibly large. Some resembled jagged mountains floating in midair, while others looked like intricate sculptures carved from pure crystal. Panic erupted almost instantly. Cars screeched to a halt as drivers abandoned their vehicles to stare at the sky. Children cried, clutching their parents' hands tightly. Phones buzzed incessantly as people tried to call loved ones or capture videos of the surreal sight. Social media exploded with posts and hashtags, all asking the same question: what is happening? Then, without warning, every electronic device on Earth went silent. Televisions flickered off. Radios crackled into static. Even satellites orbiting high above the planet stopped transmitting signals. For one terrifying moment, the entire world fell eerily quiet, and then the message came. A voice boomed across every frequency, loud enough to shake buildings and rattle windows. It spoke in perfect English, calm and cold, devoid of emotion. Attention, inhabitants of this planet. We are the Vrika. Your species has been deemed unworthy of continued existence. Surrender your resources and prepare for assimilation or face annihilation. People stood frozen, too shocked to react. The voice repeated itself in dozens of languages, ensuring no one missed its chilling ultimatum. When the broadcast ended, the silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Elena Vasquez was in her lab at the time, analyzing samples of extremophiles she had collected from a volcanic crater in Iceland. She didn't hear the initial announcement. Her focus was entirely on her work. But when her equipment suddenly shut down, she knew something was wrong. Stepping outside, she saw the ships hovering ominously in the distance. Her stomach churned as she realized the magnitude of what was happening. Elena wasn't the type to panic easily. A brilliant xenobiologist with years of experience studying life in Earth's harshest environments, she had always been fascinated by the possibility of extraterrestrial life. But nothing could have prepared her for this. As she watched the chaos unfold around her, the screaming crowds, the abandoned cars, the desperate attempts to flee, she couldn't help but think about how unprepared humanity truly was. Government officials scrambled to respond. Emergency meetings were held in secret bunkers, where leaders debated whether to comply with the Vrika's demands or fight back. Military forces mobilized, though everyone knew Earth's weapons would be useless against such advanced technology. Within hours, the first attacks began. The Vrika wasted no time asserting their dominance. Their ships unleashed beams of blinding light that vaporized entire military bases in seconds. Cities crumbled under relentless bombardment. Entire populations were rounded up and herded into makeshift camps where they were forced to work under brutal conditions. Resistance was met with swift and merciless retaliation. Amid the devastation, Elena found herself haunted by questions. Why had the Vrika chosen Earth? What did they want with humanity? And most importantly, how could they possibly be stopped? Her search for answers led her to an unexpected discovery. While examining fragments of debris left behind by the Vrika's attacks, she noticed something peculiar. The material appeared to be organic alive, even. Its structure bore similarities to certain microorganisms she had studied in extreme environments. Could it be possible that the Vrika's technology wasn't purely mechanical, that there was some kind of biological component to their ships and weapons. Determined to investigate further, Elena reached out to colleagues who still had access to functional labs. Together, they pieced together a theory. The Vrika's crystalline exoskeletons weren't merely armor, they were living organisms, symbiotically fused with their hosts. This fusion allowed the aliens to adapt rapidly to new environments, making them nearly invincible, but adaptation came with a price. Living organisms were vulnerable to disease, mutation, and environmental stressors. If humanity could exploit this weakness, they might stand a chance. Elena shared her findings with anyone who would listen, but few took her seriously. Governments were too busy negotiating surrender terms, and civilians were too overwhelmed by fear to consider fighting back. Frustrated but undeterred, Elena decided to take matters into her own hands. She began gathering ally scientists, engineers, soldiers, and hackers, all united by a single goal: survival. Among them was Captain Marcus Kane, a grizzled war veteran who had lost his family during the initial invasion. Though skeptical of Elena's plan at first, he eventually agreed to help after witnessing the destruction caused by the Vrika firsthand. Together, they formed a small but determined resistance group. Their mission was simple yet daunting: find a way to weaponize Earth's biology against the invaders. It wouldn't be easy. Resources were scarce, and the odds were stacked heavily against them, but they had no other choice. As the days turned into weeks, the Vrika tightened their grip on Earth. Oceans were drained, forests were burned, and cities were reduced to rubble. Billions died, either directly from the attacks or indirectly from starvation and disease. Yet amidst the despair, a spark of hope remained. Elena and her team refused to give up. One night, as she stared at the stars obscured by the alien fleet, Elena whispered to herself, "You made a mistake, Vrika. You chose the wrong species." Little did she know, those words would soon become humanity's rallying cry. The world had become a shadow of its former self. Cities lay in ruins, their once bustling streets now empty except for the occasional patrol of Vrika drones. The air was thick with ash and smoke from burning forests, and the oceans once teeming with life had been drained to near nothingness. Survivors huddled together in hidden bunkers or roamed the wastelands, scavenging for food and water. Humanity's spirit seemed broken, crushed under the weight of an enemy that saw them as nothing more than pests to be exterminated. But not everyone had given up. Deep beneath the rubble of what was once New York City, a small group of survivors worked tirelessly in secret. They called themselves the Resistance, though group might have been too generous a term. It was more like a patchwork collection of misfit scientists who refused to abandon their research. Soldiers who couldn't bear to surrender, hackers who found purpose in dismantling alien tech, and ordinary people driven by sheer desperation. At the center of it all was Dr. Elena Vasquez, whose quiet determination kept the fragile coalition together. Elena knew they were running out of time. The Vrika were methodical in their conquest, stripping Earth of its resources with terrifying efficiency. Their massive machines tore through mountains and plains, harvesting minerals and energy at an alarming rate. Enslaved humans were forced to operate these machines, their bodies pushed to the brink of collapse. Those who resisted were executed on the spot, their bodies left as warnings to others. Despite the grim reality, Elena clung to hope. Her discovery about the Vrika's biology, a living, symbiotic relationship between their crystalline exoskeletons and their organic hosts, offered a glimmer of possibility. If she could develop a targeted pathogen capable of breaking down those exoskeletons, humanity might stand a chance. But turning theory into practice required access to advanced genetic engineering tools, most of which were now locked away in facilities controlled by the Vrika. The mission was risky, almost suicidal. Yet Elena insisted it was their only option. "We can't fight them head-on," she told Captain Marcus Kane during one of their late-night strategy sessions. But we don't need brute force. We need precision. Something they won't see coming. Kane nodded reluctantly. He didn't fully understand the science behind Elena's plan, but he trusted her judgment. A grizzled man with scars, both visible and invisible, Kane had seen enough death to know when someone was worth following. And Elena's unwavering resolve reminded him of why he'd joined the Resistance in the first place. To protect what little remained of humanity. Their target was a research lab located in the heart of Manhattan, or what was left of it. Before the invasion, the facility had housed cutting-edge equipment for studying extremophiles, organisms that thrived in Earth's harshest environments. Elena believed the data stored there could help refine her pathogen, making it more effective against the Vrika. Getting to the lab wouldn't be easy. The area was heavily guarded, patrolled by squads of insectoid soldiers and flying drones equipped with sensors capable of detecting even the slightest movement. To make matters worse, the Resistance lacked proper weapons. Their arsenal consisted mostly of makeshift explosives and scavenged alien tech cobbled together by their resident hacker. A wiry young man named Theo. We'll need a distraction, Kane said, pointing to a crude map of the city spread out on the table. Something big enough to draw their attention away from the lab. I've got just the thing, Theo replied, holding up a device he'd been tinkering with. It looked like a jumble of wires and metal scraps, but his grin suggested otherwise. This baby should emit a signal strong enough to confuse their drones. Might even fry a few circuits if we're lucky. Elena frowned. And what happens if it doesn't work? Then we improvise, Kane said firmly. That's what we do best. The team spent days preparing for the mission, gathering supplies and rehearsing every possible scenario. They knew failure wasn't an option, not when so much depended on their success. Finally, on a cold, moonless night, they set out. The journey to the lab was fraught with danger. Every step felt like walking through a minefield, with unseen threats lurking around every corner. At one point, they narrowly avoided detection by hiding in the shadows of a collapsed building while a patrol of Vrika soldiers marched past. Another time, they encountered a pack of feral dogs, their eyes glowing eerily in the dark. The animals had been mutated by the Vrika's environmental tampering, their teeth sharp and their growls unnervingly human-like. When they finally reached the lab, Theo activated his device. A high-pitched whine filled the air, followed by the sound of distant explosions as drones plummeted from the sky. For a brief moment, chaos reigned. Now, Kane shouted, signaling the team to move. They slipped inside the lab unnoticed, their footsteps muffled by layers of dust and debris. The interior was dimly lit, the power long since drained by the invaders. Elena led the way, her flashlight illuminating rows of shattered glass and overturned tables. Despite the destruction, she managed to locate the main server room, where crucial data was still stored, working quickly. She connected her laptop to the system and began downloading files. Beside her, Theo monitored the entrance, keeping watch for any signs of trouble. Meanwhile, Kane and the others stood guard outside, ready to fend off any attackers. Time seemed to slow as the seconds ticked by. Just when it seemed like they might pull it off, alarms blared throughout the building. Red lights flashed, casting eerie shadows on the walls. They know we're here. Theo yelled, panic creeping into his voice. Keep going. Elena snapped, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Almost done. Moments later, the door burst open, and a squad of Vrika soldiers stormed in. Their crystalline exoskeletons gleamed menacingly in the red light, their claws poised to strike. Kane and his team opened fire, using whatever weapons they had to hold the aliens at bay. Bullets ricocheted off the Vrika's armor, doing little damage but buying precious seconds. I've got it, Elena exclaimed, yanking the hard drive from the server. "Let's go." Kane barked, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the exit. The escape was chaotic. Explosions rocked the building as the Vrika retaliated, collapsing walls and sending chunks of concrete raining down. One by one, members of the team fell, some injured, others captured. By the time they reached the surface, only Elena, Kane, and Theo remained. As they fled into the night, Elena clutched the hard drive tightly to her chest. She knew the cost of their success would weigh heavily on her conscience, but she also knew it was worth it. Back at the bunker, Elena immediately began analyzing the data. What she found confirmed her suspicions. The Vrika's exoskeletons were indeed biological, relying on complex chemical processes to maintain their structure. With this information, she could fine-tune her pathogen to target those processes specifically, weakening the Vrika's defenses, but challenges remained. Developing the pathogen would take time they didn't have. Supplies were running low, morale was faltering, and tensions within the resistance were rising. Some members argued that unleashing a bioweapon could have catastrophic consequences, potentially harming Earth's ecosystems as well as the Vrika. Others believed the risk was necessary, if it meant reclaiming their planet. Elena listened to their concerns but remained steadfast. "I know it's dangerous," she said during one heated debate. "But sitting here waiting for the Vrika to finish us off isn't an option either. If we want to survive, we have to fight back. And this is how we do it." Her words resonated with many, though not everyone agreed. As the days passed, fractures began to form within the group. Trust eroded, replaced by suspicion and fear. One evening, as Elena worked late in the lab, Kane approached her. His face was grim, his usual stoicism replaced by unease. "We've got a problem," he said quietly. "What is it?" Elena asked, looking up from her microscope. "There's a leak. Someone's been feeding intel to the Vrika." Elena's blood ran cold. Betrayal was the last thing they needed right now. "Do you know who it is?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kane shook his head. "Not yet, but we'll find out. In the meantime, keep your guard up." As he walked away, Elena stared at the vials of experimental pathogens lined up on the counter. For the first time, doubt crept into her mind. Was she doing the right thing? Could humanity truly win this war without destroying itself in the process? She didn't have answers, but she knew one thing for certain. The Vrika had underestimated humanity, mistaking chaos for weakness. And if Elena had anything to say about it, they would soon regret that mistake. The resistance was falling apart, and it wasn't just because of the Vrika. Inside the bunker, tension simmered like a pot about to boil over. Arguments erupted daily, voices growing louder as fear and exhaustion took their toll. Supplies were dwindling, food rations were cut in half. Water had to be rationed even more strictly, and medical kits were nearly empty. The air felt heavy with despair, pressing down on everyone like an invisible weight. Elena tried to focus on her work, but it was becoming harder each day. The discovery of the traitor among them cast a dark shadow over everything. Someone within the resistance had been feeding information to the Vrika, tipping them off about plans, locations, and weaknesses. It explained why so many of their missions had failed recently, why ambush seemed to happen without warning. But who could it be? Who would betray their own people to an enemy that treated humans like insects? Captain Marcus Kane spent most of his time questioning members of the group, searching for clues or inconsistencies in their stories. He wasn't subtle about it. He stormed through the bunker, demanding answers, his sharp eyes scanning every face for signs of guilt. His temper flared easily now, worn thin by stress and frustration. "We're being watched," he growled one evening during a meeting. "Someone here is working for them. And if we don't figure out who, we're all dead." No one spoke. Everyone avoided eye contact, staring at the floor or picking nervously at their clothes. Suspicion hung thick in the air, poisoning trust and turning allies into strangers. Elena hated it. She knew paranoia could destroy what little unity they had left, but she couldn't deny the truth. Someone was helping the Vrika. Despite the chaos, Elena pressed on with her research. The data recovered from the lab had given her new insights into the Vrika's biology, allowing her to refine her pathogen. If successful, the bioweapon would weaken the crystalline exoskeletons of the aliens, making them vulnerable to attack. But progress was slow, hindered not only by limited resources, but also by the constant threat of betrayal. One night, Theo, the hacker who had helped build the signal jammer, approached Elena while she worked. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by nervous energy. "I think I know who it is," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder to make sure no one else was listening. "Who?" Elena asked, lowering her voice. "It's Rachel," Theo said, referring to one of the newer recruits. "She's been acting weird lately, always disappearing, asking too many questions about our plans." Elena frowned. Rachel was quiet and reserved, keeping mostly to herself since joining the resistance. But suspicion alone wasn't proof. "Are you sure?" "No," Theo admitted. "But it makes sense, doesn't it? She showed up out of nowhere, right after the last ambush." Elena nodded slowly. "We need evidence before we accuse anyone. Otherwise, we'll tear ourselves apart." But finding evidence proved difficult. Rachel denied any wrongdoing when confronted, her expression calm despite the accusations. "I'm not a spy," she insisted, her voice steady. "If you don't believe me, then lock me up. At least you'll know where I am." Kane hesitated, torn between caution and anger. In the end, he decided to confine Rachel to a separate section of the bunker, guarded around the clock. It was a temporary solution, but it didn't ease the tension. Days passed, and the situation grew worse. Food shortages led to fights. Some members argued that continuing to develop the pathogen was pointless, claiming it would only cause more harm than good. Others accused Kane of poor leadership, blaming him for the deaths of those lost during failed missions. Then came the ambush. It happened suddenly, without warning. One moment, the bunker was quiet. The next, alarms blared as Vrika drones descended from above. Their sensors must have detected heat signatures or movement because they targeted the entrance with precision. Explosions rocked the structure, collapsing walls and sending debris flying. Panic erupted. People scrambled for cover, shouting and screaming as dust filled the air. Elena grabbed the hard drive containing her research and stuffed it into a backpack, knowing it was their only hope. Around her, chaos reigned. Some fought back with whatever weapons they had, while others fled deeper into the bunker. Kane barked orders, trying to organize a defense, but it was futile. The Vrika overwhelmed them within minutes. Soldiers poured into the bunker, their crystalline bodies gleaming under the flickering emergency lights. They moved with terrifying efficiency, rounding up survivors and dragging them away. Elena hid behind an overturned table, clutching her backpack tightly. Her heart pounded in her chest as she watched the invaders systematically dismantle the resistance. She wanted to fight back, to do something, anything, but she knew it would be suicide. Instead, she waited, praying they wouldn't find her. When the noise finally subsided, Elena peeked out cautiously. The bunker was eerily silent, its once bustling halls now littered with bodies and wreckage. Most of the team was gone, captured, or killed. Only a handful remained, including Kane, who lay unconscious near the entrance, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. Rachel was nowhere to be seen. Elena's stomach churned as realization sank in. Theo had been right. Rachel was the traitor. Guilt and anger warred inside her as she knelt beside Kane, checking his pulse. He was alive, though barely. Gently, she shook him awake. "Kane, she whispered urgently. "We have to go, now." He groaned, blinking up at her through swollen eyes. "What happened?" "They found us," Elena said grimly. "Rachel betrayed us." Kane's jaw tightened, pain and fury flashing across his face. "Damn it," he muttered, struggling to sit up. "How many made it?" "Not enough," Elena replied, helping him to his feet. "Just us and maybe a few others scattered in the tunnels." They moved quickly, slipping through the shadows toward the emergency exit. Along the way, they salvaged what little equipment they could carry, a few vials of the unfinished pathogen, some tools, and a portable generator. Every step felt like walking through a graveyard, the silence broken only by the distant hum of Rika machinery that once outside. They regrouped with two other survivors who had managed to escape. Together, they set out into the wasteland, heading for a remote location Elena had scouted weeks earlier, a hidden cave system far from Rika patrols. It wasn't much, but it would provide shelter while they regrouped Dodd as they trudged through the desolate landscape. Elena replayed the events in her mind. How had they missed the signs? Had Rachel truly believed cooperating with the Vrika would save her life? Or had she been coerced somehow? Either way, the damage was done. The resistance was shattered, its members either dead or captured by the time they reached the caves. Exhaustion weighed heavily on everyone. They collapsed onto the cold stone floor, too tired to speak. Elena stared at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. She thought about all the lives lost, not just today, but since the invasion began. Billions of people wiped out, entire cities reduced to rubble. For what? Resources? Power? Did the Vrika even understand the cost of their actions? Or did they see humanity as nothing more than collateral damage? And yet, despite everything, Elena refused to give up. She clutched the backpack containing her research, reminding herself why she kept fighting. If the Vrika wanted Earth, they would have to pay a price one they hadn't anticipated. "Congratulations, aliens," she whispered bitterly. "You chose the wrong species." Her words echoed softly in the darkness, a promise to herself and to the billions who had already fallen. No matter what it took, she would finish her work. She would find a way to strike back, because surrendering wasn't an option, not anymore. The cave was cold and damp, its jagged walls glistening faintly in the dim light of a single lantern. Elena sat hunched over her makeshift lab, a cluttered table covered with vials, test tubes, and scraps of alien tech scavenged from the ruins. Her hands moved quickly but carefully as she worked, mixing chemicals and analyzing samples under a cracked microscope. Every moment counted now. Every second brought the Vrika closer to finishing their conquest of Earth. Outside, the world had become unrecognizable. Once lush forests were reduced to barren wastelands, their soil stripped bare by the invaders' machines. Rivers ran dry, their waters drained to power the Vrika's sprawling operations. Cities lay silent, their streets empty except for the occasional patrol of insectoid soldiers. Humanity's once thriving civilization was crumbling, piece by piece, into dust, but Elena refused to let despair consume her. She focused on the task at hand, pouring all her energy into perfecting the bioweapon. The pathogen was nearly complete. It just needed one final adjustment to ensure it targeted only the Vrika's crystalline exoskeletons without harming other forms of life. At least, that was the plan. Captain Marcus Kane stood nearby, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. His wounds had healed somewhat, though deep bruises still marked his face. He watched Elena work, his expression unreadable. "Are you sure about this?" he asked finally, breaking the silence. Elena paused, looking up from her notes. "About what? This thing you're making," King said, gesturing toward the lab. "What if it gets out of control? What if it spreads beyond the Vrika?" "It won't," Elena replied firmly, though there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. I've designed it to break down specific chemical bonds found only in their exoskeletons. It won't affect anything else. But what if you're wrong? Kane pressed. We've seen how adaptable the Vrika are. What if they evolve again? Or worse, what if the pathogen mutates and starts attacking us too? Elena sighed, setting down her pipette. I can't answer those questions, Marcus. All I know is that we don't have another option. If we don't try this, we lose everything. Is that what you want? Kane didn't respond immediately. He looked away, his gaze fixed on the flickering lantern. After a long pause, he said quietly, No, but I'm not ready to gamble the rest of humanity on a maybe. Elena nodded, understanding his concerns. She shared them herself, though she couldn't afford to dwell on them. Doubt would only slow her down, and time was something they didn't have. Finally, after days of relentless work, the pathogen was ready. Elena held up a small vial filled with a glowing green liquid, examining it closely. It looked harmless enough, almost beautiful in its simplicity. But she knew better than anyone the devastation it could unleash. We need to test it, she said, turning to Kane. He raised an eyebrow. On what? We don't exactly have spare Vrika lying around. Elena smiled faintly. Not directly. But we can use animals once infected by their environmental tampering. If the pathogen works, it should weaken the mutations caused by their technology. They ventured outside cautiously, staying close to the shadows to avoid detection. The landscape was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of wildlife replaced by an oppressive stillness. Eventually, they came across a group of mutated creatures, once ordinary animals, now grotesque parodies of their former selves. Their bodies were twisted and misshapen, their eyes glowing with unnatural light. Elena approached one of the creatures, a dog-like animal with elongated limbs and razor-sharp teeth. She hesitated for a moment, then injected it with a small dose of the pathogen. The reaction was immediate. The creature convulsed violently, its body trembling as the pathogen began breaking down the alien alterations. Within minutes, its mutations reversed, the glowing eyes dimmed, its claws softened, and its distorted form returned to something resembling normalcy. When the process was complete, the animal collapsed, exhausted but alive. It works, Elena whispered, relief washing over her. Kane nodded grimly. Now comes the hard part. Releasing the pathogen into the wild wasn't as simple as pouring it into a river or scattering it across the land. They needed to distribute it strategically, ensuring maximum impact on the Vrika while minimizing collateral damage. Elena decided to target areas where the invaders were most active: mining sites, resource extraction facilities, and slave camps. These locations were heavily guarded, making infiltration nearly impossible. Their first attempt ended in disaster. Armed with crude gas masks and backpacks filled with the pathogen, Elena and Kane led a small team to a nearby mining operation. They planned to release the pathogen through the facility's ventilation system, exposing the workers and the Vrika, overseeing them, to the bioweapon. But the Vrika were waiting for them. As soon as they breached the perimeter, alarms blared and drones descended from above. The team scattered, firing blindly as explosions rocked the ground beneath their feet. Elena barely escaped, clutching her backpack tightly as shrapnel tore through the air around her. By the time she regrouped with Kane, half their team was gone. They knew we were coming. Kane growled, his voice laced with frustration. Elena clenched her fists, anger bubbling inside her. Rachel must have told them more than we thought. Despite the setback, they refused to give up. Over the next few weeks, they launched smaller, more covert operations, releasing the pathogen in isolated bursts. Each mission was risky, often resulting in casualties, but the effects were undeniable. Infected animals turned feral, attacking Vrika patrols. Mutated plants withered and died, disrupting the invaders' resource-gathering efforts. Even some of the enslaved humans showed signs of recovery, their bodies healing as the pathogen countered the alien alterations forced upon them. Word of the Resistance's success spread slowly but surely, inspiring others to join their cause. Survivors emerged from hiding, bringing fresh supplies and much-needed reinforcements. For the first time since the invasion began, hope stirred among the remnants of humanity. But hope came at a cost. The pathogen continued to evolve faster than expected, adapting to new hosts and spreading uncontrollably. Forests collapsed as infected trees rotted from the inside out. Entire ecosystems teetered on the brink of collapse, threatening to take humanity down with them. Elena wrestled with guilt as she watched the destruction unfold. She had created this weapon to save Earth, yet it was destroying the very planet she sought to protect. Was there no way to stop the Vrika without sacrificing so much? Her doubts deepened when reports surfaced of humans falling ill. In some cases, the pathogen had jumped species, infecting people exposed to heavily contaminated environments. Symptoms ranged from mild fevers to severe organ failure, leaving entire communities devastated. "We can't keep doing this," Kane said during one heated argument. "Every time we release the pathogen, we risk killing more of our own people. And if we stop, the Vrika win," Elena shot back. "Is that what you want? To roll over and die?" "I'm not saying we surrender," Kane snapped. "I'm saying we need a better plan. Something that doesn't involve poisoning the entire planet." Elena opened her mouth to argue, but stopped herself. As much as she hated to admit it, he was right. They needed a decisive blow, one that would cripple the Vrika without further endangering Earth's fragile ecosystems. Then it hit her. "Their command ship," she said suddenly, her eyes lighting up. "That's where we strike." Kane frowned. "You mean the one orbiting Earth? How do you propose we get there?" "We use their own tech against them," Elena explained. "Scavenge parts from their machines. Build a device to amplify the pathogen's effects specifically against their crystalline structures. If we can infiltrate the ship and release the amplified version, we can take out the entire fleet at once." It was a desperate plan, bordering on suicidal. But desperation was all they had left. The journey to the command ship was perilous, requiring them to navigate treacherous terrain and evade constant patrols. Along the way, they encountered rogue AI systems abandoned by their creators, scavenging for scraps of information about the Vrika's weaknesses. One such system provided crucial intel. The command ship housed a central hub controlling all communications and resource distribution. Destroying it would sever the invaders' chain of command, leaving them disorganized and vulnerable. When they finally reached the launch site, Elena felt a mix of fear and determination. There was no turning back now, as they boarded a stolen Vrika shuttle. Kane glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "If this doesn't work—" "It will," Elena interrupted, her voice steady despite the knot of anxiety in her stomach. "It has to." The shuttle ascended into the sky, leaving Earth far below. Through the viewport, Elena caught glimpses of the alien fleet looming like dark clouds against the stars. For the first time in months, she allowed herself a small smile. "Congratulations, aliens," she murmured under her breath. "You chose the wrong species." And with that, the shuttle disappeared into the void, carrying humanity's last hope with it. The Vrika command ship loomed ahead, a monstrous structure that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Its surface shimmered with an eerie glow, pulsating faintly as if alive. Jagged spires jutted out in random directions, giving it the appearance of a giant, crystalline beast floating in the void of space. Elena stared at it through the shuttle's viewport, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the moment everything hinged on. Inside the cramped cabin, Captain Marcus Kane double-checked their equipment one last time. Beside him, Theo worked furiously to recalibrate the stolen alien tech they had cobbled together into a makeshift amplifier for the pathogen. His fingers flew across the controls, sweat dripping down his face despite the cold air inside the shuttle. "We're almost there," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. "Just hold on." Elena nodded, gripping the edge of her seat tightly. She felt a strange mix of emotions: fear, determination, and something akin to awe. For all their brutality, the Vrika were undeniably advanced, their technology far beyond anything humanity had ever created. It was both terrifying and humbling to stand, or rather, fly against such a force as the shuttle approached the ship. Alarms blared, and red warning lights flashed across its surface. The Vrika had detected them. "Here we go," Kane said grimly, gripping the controls. "Brace yourselves." A squadron of alien fighters emerged from the ship's docking bay, sleek and deadly as they raced toward the shuttle. Laser blasts streaked past them, narrowly missing the hull. Kane maneuvered the shuttle with practiced skill, weaving through the chaos as explosions lit up the darkness around them. "They're trying to disable us," Theo shouted, clinging to his seat as the ship rocked violently. "Not today." Kane growled, pushing the shuttle to its limits. With one final burst of speed, he slipped past the fighters and entered the command ship's hangar bay. The landing was rough, but successful. As soon as the shuttle touched down, the team sprang into action. Armed with scavenged weapons and wearing crude gas masks to protect against potential contamination, they moved swiftly through the labyrinthine corridors of the alien vessel. The interior of the ship was unlike anything they had expected. Walls pulsed with organic light, and strange, insect-like creatures scurried along the floors and ceilings, tending to unseen tasks. The air was thick and humid, carrying the faint scent of metal and decay. Every step echoed eerily, as though the ship itself was watching them. "This place feels alive," Elena whispered, her voice tinged with unease. "It probably is," Kane replied, his gun raised as he scanned the area for threats. "Stay sharp." They encountered resistance almost immediately. Groups of Rika soldiers appeared around every corner, their crystalline exoskeletons gleaming ominously under the dim lighting. Battles erupted in narrow hallways, the sound of gunfire and alien shrieks filling the air. Each confrontation left the team battered and bruised, but they pressed on, driven by sheer willpower. Finally, after what felt like hours of relentless fighting, they reached the central hub. It was a massive chamber filled with glowing consoles and towering structures that resembled nests made of crystal. In the center stood a colossal being, a Vrika leader, larger and more imposing than any they had seen before. Its body was encased in layers of shimmering armor, and its multifaceted eyes glowed with an otherworldly intelligence. "You dare challenge us?" the creature hissed, its voice reverberating through the chamber. "Your species is weak, divided, unworthy of survival." Elena stepped forward, clutching the device containing the amplified pathogen. "Maybe we are weak," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "But you underestimated us. You thought we'd roll over and die without a fight. That was your mistake." Before the Vrika could react, Elena activated the device. A low hum filled the air, growing louder and more intense as the pathogen spread throughout the chamber. The walls began to crack and crumble, the organic material disintegrating under the bioweapon's effects. The Vrika leader let out a deafening roar, its crystalline body fracturing as the pathogen took hold. One by one, the soldiers surrounding it collapsed, their exoskeletons shattering like glass. Panic spread through the ship as the infection raced through its systems, dismantling everything in its path. "Let's move," Kane barked, grabbing Elena's arm and pulling her toward the exit. They ran through collapsing corridors, dodging falling debris and bursts of energy as the ship began to self-destruct. Behind them, the central hub imploded, sending shockwaves rippling through the structure. Alarms screamed, and emergency lights flashed wildly as the Vrika scrambled to contain the damage. But it was too late. Reaching the hangar bay, they leaped aboard the shuttle just as the first major explosion rocked the ship. Kane fired up the engines and launched them into space mere seconds before the command ship exploded in a brilliant burst of light. Chunks of debris hurtled past them as the remaining fleet descended into chaos. Their connection to the central hub severed. Silence fell over the cabin as they watched the remnants of the Vrika fleet retreat, their once imposing ships limping away in disarray. Humanity had won, but at what cost? When they returned to Earth, the devastation was overwhelming. The pathogen had spread uncontrollably, ravaging ecosystems and leaving entire regions uninhabitable. Billions were dead, either from the Vrika's attacks or the unintended consequences of the bioweapon. Cities lay in ruins, forests were reduced to ash, and oceans teetered on the brink of collapse. Elena stood atop a crumbling skyscraper, gazing out at the scarred landscape below. Snow began to fall, a rare sight after years of ecological upheaval, and for a moment, she allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope. The planet was resilient, just like its people. If given time, it would heal. But healing wouldn't come easily. Survivors gathered in makeshift camps, working together to rebuild what little remained. Governments no longer existed, replaced by loose coalitions of communities united by a shared goal: survival. Scientists like Elena turned their focus to reversing the damage caused by the pathogen, searching for ways to restore balance to Earth's fragile ecosystems. As she looked out at the horizon, Elena reflected on everything that had happened. The Vrika had underestimated humanity, mistaking chaos for weakness. They had assumed Earth's inhabitants would surrender without a fight, never imagining the lengths they would go to protect their home. In the end, the invaders paid dearly for their mistake. But so too did humanity. Elena whispered softly to herself, her breath visible in the cold air. "Congratulations, aliens. You chose the wrong species." Far below, amidst the ruins of a world forever changed, humanity began the long, painful process of rebuilding. They had survived, but the scars would remain for the planet, and for those who called it home. And somewhere deep within the wreckage, archaeologists uncovered fragments of the Vrika's technology. Among them was a recording of their final transmission, played over and over again by curious survivors. "We miscalculated. This species, this planet, they are poison." It was a grim reminder of the price of victory and a testament to the resilience of life itself.